pages and pages on theories of statutory construction, what the judge's role is. Cites to some American jurists, Harvard Law Review articles, on whether you can fill the gaps, you can fill the, what do they call it, the interstices. We can only fill the molecular interstices. The theory of legisputation, I think that's what he called it. Cites to Krishna Iyer, of course, who legislated on the bench. And Krishna said this, that as a judge, if you cannot instill an interpretation into an archaic wording that would suit the modern times, you're no judge at all. Sometimes that will mean infusing new policy, a new norm. But that's the law. You can't always go by the strict wording of it, because those wordings were made for a different time. Nobody can anticipate what will come up in future. Right? Initially you must have thought that, hell, let's protect the consumer only for inherently dangerous goods, because those are dangerous. If you undertake, if you're in the business of dangerous goods, then we want to hit you. Buckmaster and the others think that that shouldn't be extended to others because there's a serious question of liability and losses. No? Maybe these are people that are more pro-industry, and they think that imposing a huge cost on the industry is not going to be the right way, because then industry goes. Right? This is England that has just seen the Industrial Revolution. Right? I mean, look at the social context also. You have judges that are more bothered, but let's get industry going. Right? There was a movie I was watching the other day called The Railway Man. Has anyone seen it? Colin Firth. Who's the actor Colin Firth? Railway Man is about, it's a beautiful story actually, about American soldiers, British soldiers that were captured by the Japanese somewhere on the Thai, Myanmar, Burmese border and tortured. Because they surrendered, the British army, the British contingent then surrendered. Tortured endlessly, including Firth. Almost killed. But then the Japanese get defeated, the Germans get defeated, and they're saved, they're rescued. Now they're old people. And he finally comes back and finds the Japanese guy who tortured him. And they reconcile. Right? But in that he's also a railway enthusiast, Colin Firth. And that's why he gets tortured, because because he's a railway enthusiast and he's got a flair for mechanical stuff. He can put together radios. He actually creates a makeshift radio to hear the news. So then, because of the news, they get to know while they're in the camp being tortured that, and being made to do slave labor, that the Japanese and the Germans are losing. So it gives them hope, right? But then the radio is discovered and they're tortured more. And then they explain how railway lines are constructed. They said, you know, the kind of railway lines that you construct in the old days, through forests, through very bad terrain, you can't do it today. You know why? With all your modern technology and others, you can't do the kind of railway lines that in those days, because those require slave labor. You require people that will work like dogs and slaves. Only then can you put together a railway line like that, through those terrains. And that's very telling. So some of them subscribe to that to get industrial output, if you do too much on human rights and consumer rights, you may not get the products that you're looking for. Elon Musk, another great example, right? Tells people no holidays, nothing. Look at me, 18 hours I work, I sleep on my factory floor. Is that some standard to impose on the others? Says no, it's the only way to get good products out. Musk says it. Unless it's slave labor, I can't get you these products. So that's one line of thinking. The other line is, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's not worth the cost. Now, why kill myself to get new products? I mean, it's not worth it. Ultimately, it's quality of life. We have to live in dignity. We have to live as human beings. We need a balance. And you find that playing out, right? When you go to your law firms, some will be of the view that slave labor is the best because we need to distinguish ourselves. You want to make a mark, This is the way to do it. The others will tell you, no, you are more important than anything else. Your health is more important, your well-being is more important. And that's a constant dichotomy that will play out. And that's what you see with these judges also. That's exactly what you see with the judges. And that's exactly why I said, find your sense of purpose. But you're in the line that says, nothing matters to me except my work and my technology and my this and that. And I'm willing to kill myself and willing to kill others also for it. Or you say, no, life means much more to me than just this. I'm not going to drive myself crazy. Right? Now you see, one case law, what all it can teach you. Donahue now is not just 3 lines that you rattle in your paper. Neighborhood principle, duty of care, negligence. Much more. It goes to the fundamental meaning of life. Right? Right? You're now convinced that case needs to move to case plus. This is the beauty of it. From where to where I've taken you, right? One case, that's it. But look at how many things it reveals about so many different aspects, including of life, of the meaning of existence. Because these judges grappled with it. Look at Buckmaster, read his opinion. In fact, I would say Buckmaster's opinion somehow is much more potent than Atkins. But Buckmaster's opinion, people hated it because he was too vitriolic, too acidic. It's almost like he really wanted to smash Donahue, right? It's nasty. Read it. Nasty. So people don't like it. People don't like nasty people. Right? But if he said it in a better way, I think that could have found a lot more takers. Because he said it so nastily. Lord Denning called him a timorous coward. So he was a timorous coward. Atkins was a hero. And yet something that what Atkins said is not the ratio. The principle that you owe a duty of care to everyone, the principle of the neighborhood principle, whatever it is, so it is not the ratio, it's a biter. There's an interesting theory there also. You can spend days and days debating Donahue. Interesting personal facets also. Why did the lady file a suit? Went through a divorce in between, changed her name 3 times in between, found a lawyer who took up the Mullen cases. Same guy.
So I read somewhere that the lawyer found the victim and then they proceeded ahead with the entire case.
Yeah, because the lawyer Mullen was taken by the same lawyer. I think Walter Leachman. It's called Leachman. Interesting name. He took it up pro bono. There was a theory that he was an extortionist.
Yeah. That is what I read.
That he was an extortionist. He would file these cases and then force the company to pay up privately. That's also a theory. And you'll be fascinated that, hell, same things go on today, right? There's a theory that MC Mehta was an extortionist. Would file against all these fabulous cases and then go to industry and say, I file against you, if not. So I filed 5 cases, I become a hero. Then I go to the 6th guy and I say, It's the same pattern, public interest litigation, right? Pro bono lawyers. Right? Which is why even when we file pro bono stuff at IDIA, everyone says, what's your agenda? Like, no agenda. No, there must be an agenda. All public interest lawyers have an agenda. Right? Well, Aadhaar also said agenda. I said, agenda tha. One of our donors wanted it, we filed it. Yeah. He didn't tell us how to file it, what to file, he didn't even read it. He said, something must be done here because things are going out of hand, I'm getting concerned. We found a way for that. Right? But that's the problem. So you find what plays out in Donahue plays out today, in large part as well. Different facets, different areas. And judges are like this. This is legal realism at its best. A judge that reads the Bible, is very, very thorough with the Bible, writes, keeps a diary. His diaries were discovered later. He's looking for a case like this because he knows that manufacturers have been going scot-free. He's looking, he makes notes. And what do you see? He brings in a biblical principle into the judgment, right? You can see that happening across the globe. But you see them citing left, right, and center. From all these places. Huh? See the 377 judgment? They're all French philosopher, German philosopher, Leonard Cohen. Yeah, surprisingly, not much of Indian philosophical stuff was cited there. No Indian traditions. I didn't see much Indian cultural heritage references. Did we see? Did any of you see? Spot anything from India? Shikandi and all that? Oh. Oh. Surprising, huh? We had a far richer culture. Accepting same, what we call aberrant sexuality today, which was imposed on us from the outside. But otherwise, Indian society as we knew it had a very fluid notion of sexuality for the longest time.
Exactly, read somewhere that it is actually the English who came, and it's English who say that the king can do anything except get a man and a man married or a woman or a woman
correct.
married. And actually the English banned this practice. Before that, even in Mughal courts, there were
Correct, yeah, eunuchs were common everywhere. People with
and they were respected.
Of course, full dignity. We had a very, very, look at the Khajuraho paintings, for Christ's sake. You know, this is one place where I think the only place where the Mahatma got it wrong. Right? The Mahatma apparently gave his blessings, Gandhiji, to a set of people who wanted to destroy Khajuraho paintings because it goes against Indian culture. And Tagore had to write him a strong letter. Saying that, dear Gandhi, just because you don't like sex doesn't mean that you wipe out what Indian cultural traditions have been. Because Gandhiji then was on his experiment, no? We should deny myself sex, and force others also to deny themselves, and sleep nude with nieces, grandnieces and the like. Hey, no offense. He was probably one of the greatest spiritual beings ever, and kudos to him that he did it openly, right? He never hid it. The beauty of Gandhiji was, of course, that all of you, what you saw is what you got. He never hid any of his flaws. He said, I'm experimenting. I think brahmacharihood is the way to go. And I think everyone else should adopt it in one way or the other. And to test my brahmacharihood, I should have nude people sleeping around with me. He was open about it. Now, of course, it's a reverse. No? Politicians will be seen with nude people, and then when you catch them, they'll say, no, I was doing what Gandhi was doing. Right? It's like that guru from Bangalore, caught with an actress in a very compromising position. Swami Nityanand. Right? So very clear what the actress was doing. And yet Nityanand comes and says, this is a very high-level tantric thing that you will not understand. Hey, common man, Aam Aadmi will not understand. We are all mystical. It's very evident what's happening. Oh, no, tantra hai. Parka. See, that's the other problem. Our gurus also, they corrupt somewhere along the way. The great people, they've had greater insights than you and I into the nature of the universe, but somewhere along the line, they get corrupted. Power, no? Goes to the head. Osho Rajani, same. Brilliant philosopher, brilliant mystic. But towards the end, had to constantly be high on nitric oxide. That is up through his nose. Couldn't function without nitric oxide. Needed his 100 limousines, Rolls Royce. Acquired 100, no? What is this? Mystical gurus are supposed to be relinquishing and detaching themselves from everything. So that's a paradox. That's what society is, right? There are no heroes with 100% white and 0% black, or complexity. There's layers, and you'll get that with the law as well, and with people as well. There'll be layers, right? There's always going to be faults somewhere. That's fine. That's what humanity is about, and we need to accept that into the law as well. There's going to be no 100% right answer, right ethic, right moral. We constantly debate, we interrogate. There will be failings. But the beauty of the legal process is that we keep questioning, and we keep challenging, and we keep asking, and we keep questioning. And things that we think are right, we try and implement them. This is what Atkins did. It's what Buckmaster did. No, you can't say Buckmaster is a villain, as he was painted out to be. He strongly felt that the Industrial Revolution, the other things need to be supported. Right? We don't want to penalize industry too much. There will be other ways in which you can catch them for very egregious wrongs like inherently dangerous goods. So thinking was, if it's very inherently dangerous, let's nab them. Anything less than that, let them go. Unless we find that the fraud has been committed. So defect per se, no problem. But fraud, we'll catch them, which means there was a defect and you knew and you hit the defect. You see, so they're very clear about it. Clear culpability because you knew. Culpability because these goods that you were dealing with were inherently dangerous, you ought to have known, taken double care. Two clear exceptions from case law, they said we'll stick with it. Atkin comes and says, no, not good enough. Because what is the law if it doesn't protect the consumer against people that release? Because it's very easy for an industry to, it's very difficult to show that you knew. That's the other thing, right? Because who knows whether they knew? It's personal knowledge too, largely. It's difficult to get proof that I knew. It's almost like proving a negative. And so that's a dilemma that Atkins now comes up with. We need to set a standard. Now, what did he do? The main decision, of course, Atkins thanked it, Macmillan agreed with it. There's an interesting story also about how, in the light of the decision, all of these judges were fascinating personalities. You must read about it. If you need to understand the law, you need to understand how the law is made. You must know the backgrounds of judges and legislators, because that determines to a large extent how they make the law. Macmillan saw himself as the hero in this piece, because he wrote an autobiography at the end. And he said, you know what, but for me, this decision would have never come. Why? Because I swung it. Look at it. As Atkin, along with Tomlin, along with Tankerton, who were on one side, there was Buckmaster and Tomlin. And I considered both sides, and I thought I should go with that. But I swung it. So everyone wants his little day in the sun, right? Right? Atkin, now what is Atkin saying? Strong Christian, strong sense of ethics, strong moral grounding, wants to bring that into the law. Today, when I say that you need to be prepared for becoming a policy lawyer, the earlier policy lawyers were the ones that were driven by morality, because they were infusing a moral component into the law. But that's a bit like policy making, no? Today's policy is not just morality or philosophy, it's actually economics, science, technology, anthropology, sociology, philosophy, psychology. Today when I want a norm on criminal law, I go into psychology. Will this person do it again? How do I reform? It's a policy norm. If I think that the purpose of the criminal justice system is not to put them behind bars but to reform them, then I will apply the statute in a very different way than somebody who thinks this person committed a wrong, they must go behind bars, they must die, they must suffer, I want them to suffer. You know, somebody who's vindictive and who's got the thing that I want them to suffer will have a different way of interpreting a criminal statute than somebody who says, you know, I'm a firm believer in the fact that people are inherently good. Circumstances have made them bad, but we can bring them back. After all, Rishi Valmiki, who wrote the Ramayana, was a bandit, right? Initially, and then became the greatest of rishis. So people change. So that you'll interpret differently. So understanding the philosophies of judges, extremely important. So here you have the neighborhood principle, but where does the neighborhood principle come from? It comes from the Bible, in a different format, because the Bible has an old story of the Good Samaritan. You know the story? Anyone know the story of the Good Samaritan? No Christians here? Any Christians? Anyone went to Sunday school in a boarding school? You did. You studied the Bible then.
No, I've not studied the Bible, but I know this story.
What is the story?
So apparently a father and some other person cross the road, but they do not help the man lying on the road. But then a good Samaritan crosses and he helps the man. And I think he gets injured later, so I don't remember it fully, but I think he gets injured, so it's the question on whom the liability will lie. Would
Okay. Okay, no, I think you got the first part of the story, right? The Good Samaritan basically is about somebody lying injured by the roadside. Two people that know that person walk by on the other side without helping. A third person doesn't know him at all, comes and actually helps. Right? And Christ uses this parable then to lay down the proposition that love your neighbor. You must love your neighbor. And to Christ, the neighbor can be even someone from a completely different community. That's the beauty of the story. That people from within your own setup, I'm not asking you to love only those that are in the immediate neighborhood or people that you're familiar with, but anyone. So Samaritan is from a different town. But can the legal principle be love your neighbor? Atkins took the biblical principle. Can he superimpose it on the law? Can't. Why? Because the law can't force you to love. Can the law force you to love? That's the sterility of the law. The sterility of the law and the limitation of the law is that the law can proscribe conduct. It can tell you, don't hate. Not in your mind, but through external actions. But it can't tell you love. Can it tell you love? Can it force love? Can't. So how do you enforce it? That's why you have notions in the law like secularism, right? Secularism means what? I'll tolerate, but I don't like it. Right? I may be of a certain religion. You can't force me to like the other religion. But you can force me not to do conduct against the others. You can force me to remain neutral. But neutrality is not the same as liking. Huh? That's the sterility of law. And the sterility of secularism is we understand that secularism, unfortunately, is just about tolerating. I may still hate it deep down. I can be Muslim and hate the Christian next to me. All I need to do is make sure I don't call any words out in public. Inside my house I can say whatever I want. In my mind I can harbor that this community is the worst. But outside externally, I cannot do anything as to discriminate or insult or disparage. That is the law's limitation. And so what does Atkins say? The commandment that thou shalt love thy neighbor becomes in law that thou shalt not hurt thy neighbor. See how he flips it around. Shall not hurt your neighbor. At the very minimum, that's what we call in mathematics the lowest common denominator. How you can deal with it? Don't hurt. Google says, no, do no evil. After tracking you all around, and they say, do no evil. Right? So you see a strong moral component coming in, but adapted to the law. And this is exactly what you'll see. Now apply this principle to how judgments are made today. The same set of considerations apply. Not necessarily from the Bible, but from their own ideologies. Somebody is a free market economist. You now see Justice Sikri bringing in a lot of economics into Supreme Court judgments. Somebody is pro-reservation, somebody is anti-reservation, somebody thinks that everything should be on merit, and thinks that, well, people are born unequal, too bad, but we should still have a merit. Not realizing that for merit to operate, you need a level playing field. Because I just want to walk you through this so you apply it. Now remember, this case, again, like I said, it's unbelievable what can teach you about what goes on today. It's exactly what goes on today. Different people with different ideas. What do we call it in law? What do we call this process of lawmaking? What do we call this legal theory? that the law depends upon the personal disposition of the judges. You study jurisprudence. What is it called? Legal realism. Legal realism. This is legal realism. The legal realists were the ones who told you law is not what you study on the books. The law depends not so much on what's written in the books, but in the personality types of judges. So the law will depend on what the judge ate for breakfast. I had a nice hearty meal. I'm content, satiated. I come to court. I pass some good judgments. I ate a very heavy meal full of eggs and peas and peanuts and everything else. My God, got enormous gas filling up. Come to court, I'm terribly discomforted. I have no patience for counsels that come. When I dispense. I had a bad fight with my son or my wife, as the case may be, in a foul mood. Come there, dismiss. So the realists are of the view that law is made like that. The critical legal theorists go one step further and say that, well, the law is in many ways a replication of the hegemonic power structures that we see in society today. So the judges are picked from the elite classes. The elite classes will perpetuate their own hegemony. Right? And an elite who becomes an elite, chances are, it's like America, no? It's like Trump coming and saying, you know, I see an Indian, I see an Iraqi, and I see a Mexican. And say, Indian, go back to your country. Right? Because in America, you're not an immigrant, right? Go back to your country. Mexican, of course, go back to your country. I'll build a wall as well. And then I see a red Indian, Native American. And I'm over a point, and the red Indian looks at me saying, you came and displaced me. Right? That's why I'm stuck, right? It's a bit like that. Okay, so now you've seen a biblical proposition adapted to the law. The rule that you are to love your neighbor becomes in law. You must not injure your neighbor. And then the question is, who's my neighbor? That's very important. Because not only am I saying don't hurt your neighbor, but define the neighbor, because I must know to whom am I liable. It can't be that I'm liable to the whole, to people that I never had in mind. So I take a baby step away from contract. In contract, I'm liable only to the one that I consensually, willingly, voluntarily gave up my autonomy for. I know who that person is directly through an express wording. Tort extends it a little more, but still people within my foreseeable region. Right? Must be within my foresight. I must have had them in mind. If I have no clue that this person could be injured way down the line, tort doesn't apply. So neighbor is anybody I had in my proximate vision. Proximate vision. The answer seems to be people who are so closely and directly affected by my act that I ought to reasonably have them in contemplation as being so affected when I'm directing my mind to the acts or omissions which are called into question. You see how a judge now has taken a principle, has given it a clear legal boundary. Because you must give a legal boundary. Moral principles are easy to encapsulate because nobody is going to ask you to contain it in an enforceable format. In law, you have to have an enforceable format, and this is the format he gave it. So again, go back to the question, did he legislate? I think he did, a little bit. But then he was forced to. Right? Now, look at how he again distills out the principle. A manufacturer of products which he sells in such a form as to show that he intends them to reach the ultimate consumer in the form in which they left him with no reasonable possibility of intermediate examination, and with the knowledge that the absence of reasonable care in the preparation, blah, 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 will result in an injury, owes a duty to the consumer to take care. That's almost like somebody is writing a statute, isn't it? I mean, if you were writing a statute, you do it this way. So there's also a great lesson for how would you write policy norms. When you go out today and you're acting as a lawyer, your clients are not just about want you to win or lose a case. They also want you to frame norms. Because the client then takes the norm to the regulator or to the policymaker The best lawyers are the ones who can help them formulate those policy norms and run it through. If you can be instrumental in getting a legislation passed that will help your client, you're far more superior to a lawyer who will go and battle in court on existing legislation, right? Because you've changed the law, or you've introduced norms that will help the entire industry. And that's what a lot of lawyers do today. Now you see a lot of law firms, what do? Policy lawyers, no? Policy, they have policy wings, starting with Amar Chand, and now you have 2 or 3 law firms, including Sohan Mukherjee, that does only policy. So they will help you legislate. And what do? Sohan's firm will help the Delhi government frame health policy. And he can go to his clients and say, I have influence. I can help frame health policy. And obviously, the client stands to benefit a lot from it. If the client's a set of hospitals or doctors, I can make sure your interests are protected. That the obligations on you are not too severe. In fact, the reason that I went for my master's is because at that point, my law firm was very, very instrumental in IP policy. And I loved it because the policy game obviously is much more diverse than your regular lawyering, because you have to know economics, you have to know technology, you have to know science, and you're meeting with all these diverse people. It's intellectually far more exciting. But then I realized that I'm helping make policy for a set of multinational clients whose interests were not always aligned with the interests of the country. I mean, they want to make maximum profit from the country. They don't care really about the national interest in that sense, in the way that we want. I'm not saying they were enemies or anti-national in that way, but they, for them, money is what matters most. The other considerations like public interest and others not matter. Right? But a lot of lawyering today is that. So understand this process so you get very, very familiar with it. Okay, I think we've gone through this again. So legal creativity. We see the judge being creative, right? Because he took the dangerous goods doctrine and he said the only exceptions in those days was that the good had to be inherently dangerous, or you committed fraud because you knew that there was a defect but you didn't reveal it as a manufacturer. So what is inherently dangerous? If there is a ginger beer with a snail, I would say it's inherently dangerous because the beer by itself is not. But the moment there's a foreign substance to which your body is not used, it does become dangerous. So this doesn't make sense to me. So I'm not going against precedent. I'm just saying that almost any good can be inherently dangerous. Right? Yeah, all this we discussed. Distinguishing earlier precedent, Mullen versus Barr, you're going to come back on that tomorrow. I want a little more work from both sides on earlier case law and distinguishing it. Okay? Yeah, now, what does he do again? He produces the general duty. Earlier it was very specific, right? That's the other creative touch. I've given like I said, it's almost like a legislation. Here's a judge who carefully thought through it, who built a principle that's almost like a legislation. A general duty of care. Then, from object, he moved to a relation. Earlier it was just about, and this is something you see with great judges, they can change the paradigm. The earlier focus was on the good. Is it inherently? Now what does he say? That doesn't make sense. Now it's all about relation. Was it your neighbor? If it was your neighbor, you owed a duty of care. And the law understands relations, right? You see the same thing in Justice Chandrachud's judgment in 377 and some of the other judgments. Whereas earlier 377 and the entire discourse was about prohibited conduct. What did Chandrachud make it about? And some of the other judges? Identity. This is not just about wrong conduct, it's about, goes to the heart of identity. My identity as an individual. You see the shift? Great judges do that. Buckmaster, of course. Here. Now here's a comment on Buckmaster's was very scathing. I think beautiful language though. If you ever want to critique anything, use some of this language. So he says, so far therefore as the case of and the dicta in are concerned, it is my opinion better that they should be buried. These were case law that supported Mrs. Donoghue. 1 or 2 of them did. And he says, they should be buried so securely that their perturbed spirit shall no longer vex the law. Very powerful. Right? And then a commentator says, it is not easy to understand the violence of Lord Buckmaster's objection to the appellant's argument, that's Donohue's argument, in purely legal terms. He had something else against her. He goes much further than a straightforward appeal to contrary precedent would ordinarily demand. One might conclude that there is an additional, even an extra legal concern or some personal animus at play. Of course, one of the commentators. You never know where the truth is. But this is legal realism, no? How judges are motivated. Maybe he had a thing against a lawyer. You never know. And of course, when you look at Atkins, Atkins had a lot of weight. No? Atkins says, he says, my proposition is so elementary, Watson, as Sherlock Holmes would say. It's based on sound common sense that only a lawyer could doubt its accuracy. Because lawyers don't like common sense. Right? So you see a bit of wit also. This is important. Remember, when you're great lawyers, always great with humor. Humor can win the day. So make sure wherever you can bring in a little bit of wit, bring it in, because that carries the day. Again, like I said, it's policy style reasoning, because he uses morality, uses public health. Here, the liability for negligence, whether you style it as such or treat it as a species of culpa, is based upon a general public sentiment of moral wrongdoing for which the offender must pay. Moral wrongdoing. But acts of omission which any moral court would censure cannot in a practical world be treated as to give a right to every person injured by them. So every moral violation cannot be a legal violation. Right? So you have to be careful, and he's very careful there. In this way, rules of law arise which limit the range of complainants. And that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to curb it. He's bringing a moral principle into the law, but tailoring it and adapting it and curbing it. So it makes legal sense. It's easily enforceable as a legal law. Again, is he filling the gap in the law? Is he legislating? Because, as he rightly said, good quality, conscience, equity, etc. were disturbed in this case. And this is what he says, I do not think so ill of our jurisprudence as to suppose that its principles are so remote from the ordinary needs of civil society and the ordinary claims it makes upon its members as to deny a legal remedy where there is so obviously a social wrong. Right? Very interesting. Takes them closer to legislating. Right? Very clear. It is said that the law of England is that the poison consumer has no remedy against a negligent manufacturer. If this were the result of the authorities, I should consider the result a grave defect in the law. Is it his place to remedy defects in the law? Debatable, right? Or is it the place of the legislator? He clearly says, it's consider the result a grave defect in the law and so contrary to principle that I should hesitate long before following any decision to that effect which had not the authority of this House. Like I said earlier, reference to morality, now to policy. And here you see a creating, and now what you see is his policy considerations that flew into the judgment now are statutorily embedded. No, if you look at the Consumer Protection Act, Food Drug Regulation Act, the same principle applies. That you are liable if you don't take care. Right? Same principle, but it's now coming through specific legislation. Yeah. This is the guy who takes issue and says the neighbor principle, although perhaps the most commonly cited and in ways the most significant, cannot be regarded as part of the ratio. It's one line of thought. Right? Again, reflect on it. Go back. I'm only giving you these pointers to show you the richness of the decision and where the contests lie. You can go back and read more on it. No amount of posthumous citation, because it's one of the most widely cited decisions. You know? He says no amount of posthumous citation can of itself transfer with retrospective effect a proposition from the status of obiter to that of ratio. So saying no matter how well it's cited, it cannot take it from being an obiter to a ratio. You did obiter and ratio. Okay, I'm not going to go too much in detail. For those interested, you can pursue. I don't agree with this. I think it's still ratio, but for those who think there might be some merit, go back and investigate it. Walter Leachman was the counsel. Mabel Hannah was her name. That's her real name. Donohue was her surname from her husband, but she divorced in between. And you find her going by Mary Donohue. So some very interesting personal facts. Mullen versus A.G. Bow was the first case, but same lawyers. There's an implied warranty angle, which I don't know if any of the lawyers brought out, but hopefully they will. And the other thing is, tort law is effectively filling a gap of contract. But you see that also, no? Contract is insufficient here. How can we use tort law? Sued for 500, settled for 200. Finally, it's settled. Put the parties, right? And then, of course, there are other cases that draw on this. But when you look at these tort cases, you'll realize that the facts matter. Please go into the facts. You've all heard of and I'll stop with this. You've all heard of the McDonald's case, right? Okay. What happened in the McDonald's case? And we stop here. What happened in the McDonald's case? The most famous tort case, the most ridiculous tort case, right? In our minds. What happens in the McDonald's coffee case? Somebody went to McDonald's, an old lady, bought a hot cup of coffee, put it between her legs, and as she started driving off, the coffee spilled. Oh, I'm sorry, she tried to open the cover of the coffee, right? She's in a car, she puts the coffee there, she opens the coffee lid, and the coffee spills on her legs, and what happens? Her skin burns. No surprise. It's hot coffee. She sues. And what do you expect a court will do? An ordinary court would have said, but it's hot coffee, why did you spilt it? And you're suing McDonald's? Ridiculous, right? If you take a hot cup of coffee and you spill it on yourself, why should McDonald's be blamed? Oh, sorry, Starbucks. No, it's McDonald's. McDonald's, not Starbucks. McDonald's. McDonald's. Right? Anyone with a different view? That's why facts are important. You know the different view. Very good. Come on. Doesn't matter. Third degree burns if I have old lady, my skin is anyway weak. Third degree means what? It goes in further. If my skin is anyway brittle and weak as an old lady, it will go in deeper. How does it make a difference?
So the product that we are handing over to the consumer, it has to be of a reasonable temperature that can be handled by a reasonable person and
Very
not
good.
require very distinguished amount of care. So
Very good. Okay. You know the facts. Okay. The facts in this case actually were what constituted the liability, because of the fact that the coffee was 30 degrees higher than what the state law had norms around how hot your coffee can be, some of the regulations. They were warned in advance. The reason they made it that hot, their explanation was, we have a lot of people that come and buy the coffee and take it back in their vehicles, because America is a driving culture, no? Everyone's in their car. And they got their Starbucks. I mean, see, if those of you who've been to the States or seen movies, they're always with their coffee cups. There's a patent story there also, which I'll narrate to you next time, on how patents played a crucial role in America's walking, drinking coffee culture. You can walk and drink your coffee, right? So easily without hurting yourself because of a patent. We'll come to that later. For this case, McDonald's found out that people don't drink coffee immediately, right? They take it, they go to their car, they sit down, they may drive, then they may take sips. Now, so I put it hotter, at a hotter temperature, so that by the time they drink it, they have it at the same kind of heat that a person who ordinarily buys coffee would have had it as soon as they purchase it. Reasonable? This is the argument they ran in court. Right? It didn't impress too much. Because the court said, well, there could be people who want to drink it later, but that's their problem. For people that want to drink it immediately, put it at this temperature. It will scald them if it spills, and coffee can spill. In this case, third degree burns were also because she wore cotton sweatpants. Now what happens with cotton sweatpants? Cotton sweatpants, what happens is liquid, when it goes inside, it holds it for a much longer time. So the scalding is much deeper, much longer. She actually went to hospital. So because of all this evidence that they had been warned several times that consumers had faced this problem, and they had settled with consumers earlier. People that got burnt because of the high temperature. There was another theory that came out saying that if it's made at extremely hot temperatures, they get more cups of coffee. So the same coffee powder, I can make more cups if it's at a much higher temperature. So there's an economic reason also why they did this. You see how interesting facts can be. So in your head, the theory was one because you read about it in popular media. But when you go back and investigate the case, completely different ballgame. That's why your counsels here, we were quizzing them. They did a great job. All of you guys did a good job because you weren't given enough time. Right? So within the time that you got, I thought it was a good job. But this is not to test you here. But this is to help you understand that when you do cases and when you argue cases, facts are greatly important. They can make or break. When you study instructional classroom learning with just propositions of law, you miss the richness of this. You miss how the law is made. You miss the nuances and the facts. And that's your tool play. That's what you play with. That's exactly what you play with. Okay? So we will do Aadhaar tomorrow. And we'll do J&J also tomorrow. So I need a set of volunteers for J&J. Aadhaar anyway, I've given you the background. So we've already got, so we'll do a very short Aadhaar thing tomorrow and then move immediately to J&J. Volunteers for J&J. 1. Who else? Come on. Volunteers for J&J. Great. Fantastic. 3. Okay. Then, come on, 3 more. J&J. 3 more. No more volunteers? No more volunteers? Who all wanted to work on the case? Yesterday a lot of hands went up. Today there are no hands. You got scared off by this bit, don't be. It's the process of learning. The more you're battered, the more you learn. Jalaluddin Rumi, the Sufi mystic, said, if you're scared of a rub, how will you ever shine? Right? The things that shine, the vases and all, you need to scrub them really hard. So welcome the scrub. I'll scrub you up nicely. You'll shine. Don't be afraid of a scrub. Throw your ego out of the window. Doesn't matter. You care too much about ego, you'll never grow. Be battered. Come in. My lords, I'm all yours. Take me. That's what my senior told me once. When I first joined my law firm, he said, listen, you're going to court. On the first day you go to court, the judge will take your pants down. Right? You'll come back embarrassed, hell, painful, distraught, pain, suffering, emotional. You'll think of quitting the profession. And all he said was true. The judge took my pants down on day one, I was completely devastated. Completely. I said, it's not for me. I'm not going to go into a courtroom ever again. Second day I went in, did the same thing. Same, I went back, but little less. Because now you're slightly used to it. Third day, same thing. Then my senior told me, you'll know you've arrived as a lawyer when you go before the lordship, take your pants down and say, my lords, take me. I'm all yours. Right? So don't worry about these. There's nothing, there's no, I mean, you learn this way. This is how you learn. Okay, how many volunteers? 3 we have, 1 more, great. 2, 3, perfect. All women, I love it. Okay, great. Now come on. 3, who are the first three who put up their hands? One side, you'll be acting one side. What do you want to? You want to act for the patients or J&J? You want to act for the patients. J&J? Good. It's a tougher case, so you guys, I think you'll get the better shine. Huh? Because you'll be put to more. On the. You want to be J&J? Okay, great. So then we can shift somebody else. Who wants to be on the other side? You'll shift? So Ravleen, Shishti, Subhashini. For patients? Ishwarya? And? Shruti. For J&J. Great. You have enough stuff in the public domain, so just research it, read it, you know what the arguments are. Assume that the case is being fought in India. It is in India, so apply Indian norms, Indian standards. Very broad. Don't worry about getting it all right. Whatever you can cobble up by tomorrow is fine. Because anyway, I'll lead the discussion. Exactly as you saw it today, we'll point you to the right case law. We'll take off because it's not a moot court competition. It's really instructional. To highlight certain points so that the class can benefit. As you saw today. So you see, I didn't let them speak much because it's not a competition. It's just so that they bring out some arguments and their learning, of course, will be 10 times that of yours because they're personally invested. You see, their egos have taken a bruising, so they will remember this for much longer than you have. No, seriously. They're personally impacted by this, right? That's the advantage. So their learning, because they volunteered, will be far superior to yours. Because you've been there, you've been relaxed, no tension, stress nahi hai. They're thinking constantly, Arey, ab kya hoga? You know, this guy's catching us on everything. They're on their feet. This is a training to be a lawyer, no? They're constantly alert. So now their training, what they picked up from this, is far higher than what you have. That's why it's important that you volunteer. Right? Because there's no test. It's not evaluating you on how you're performing. It's a process of learning. Okay?
So, one good question was that why
Mm-hmm.
by oral, by conduct, and by written form.
Mm-hmm.
If we get by the conduct, like at the maximum, some of the other judges said that when you monetize something, you act, it is an overt act which says that you are entering into a contract.
Mm-hmm.
So if that could have been brought in the contract, not under tort law, getting the
How will you bring it under contract between the manufacturer and between the consumer?
implied contract.
How?
When you are monetizing something, it means you are assuming that there will be some other party who will be consuming it. And when you
But I've not indicated by my conduct that I'm willing to enter into a contractual relationship with that party, you know. The conduct has to indicate that I want to enter into a contract. But they're saying here it's too far-fetched for me to assume that the conduct of mine in putting a product in the market would mean that I enter into a contract.
Sir, then what would it mean if I
Conduct means that, for example, I treat, I am in close vicinity. There's a closer neighborhood principle, for example, right? And through a series of instances, I reveal to you that if I do this, it means, if I do X, it means Y. If I do A, it means B. So I need definitive proof to show that the conduct means that I'm willing to submerge myself into that relationship. Till now, there is no indication whatsoever from case law or others that I'm willing to subject myself to an interpersonal relationship with you. You see, contract is about autonomy. So far, there is no indication from any precedent, any law, any norm that the mere fact of me putting out a product means that I'm willing to consider myself engaged in a contract with you. Right? Conduct means conduct that comes very close to supporting the autonomous principle on which contractual foundations lie. Contract is for autonomy. I autonomously agree to be bound by some things to you specifically. If the societal norm then is that no, it's not considered and no case has ever supported it, then it's difficult to make out that argument. But assume that the legislator brought it in, or somebody brought it, it becomes a norm from top down. Then you can go in and say tomorrow that yes, you should have known, because ultimately it can be a fiction as well. I can create a fiction. That yes, consider yourself bound by a contract. The moment you put your products out, anybody that bought the product or you intended to buy the product will be considered to be bound by the contract. Right? Because in this case, tomorrow somebody takes a ginger beer and uses it in the lab for an experiment and something goes wrong. Am I contractually bound with them? Right? The next question. Assume that you're bound by conduct to the consumer who consumes it. Tomorrow someone takes it, uses it in the lab. Does that contractual theory then extend there?
then assuming why does a product manufacturer put instruction or a warning on a product if their intention is not
Because today, if you don't put a warning, you're liable in tort. You're liable in product liability law. Those are not contracts.
even at that time when the product liability was not there as it has been
There could be regulations. There could be the regulations were there from the earliest times. If I have a law or a regulation saying that you must warn, especially drugs. That's regulatory. But you can't take a warning to mean indicative of the acceptance of the fact that I have a contract. There are two distinct things. I can warn the world at large, because tort is about the world at large. Product liability is about the world at large. Contract is about an interpersonal relationship. It's far more personal. But it's an interesting question. Why should contract remain that way? Can we expand it? Particularly since the autonomous basis of contract and the moral basis of contracts have long eroded. Now it's about efficient theories, economics. If it's about economics, can't I read in a contract? So it's a good question. Investigate it. Under the present set of norms, can we read in a contract? Even outside of situations where there's no real personal equation or personal privity. Right? And I'm pretty sure there would be case law today to support that. Especially because nobody cares about the moral basis of contracts anymore. I mean, not many. Right? I promise I must be beholden to the promise. Now it doesn't play well in a court of law also. They won't even give you specific relief in a lot of cases. Right? Okay. With that we break and then we come back tomorrow 10:45, huh? Because some of you have a conflicting class, no? with the gentleman who's reaching arbitration.
The other,
Oh, it's done? Huh?
we have conflict with the
With the theorizing? When is that finishing? Oh no, then I can't do much about that. So we'll do, then tomorrow if there's no conflict, we'll do 10:30. So we get, because tomorrow will be Aadhaar and J&J. So let's do 10:30 tomorrow. Huh? Ravleen? 10:30 we do, and we'll take it till about 12:45, 12:30, 12:45. To a straight thing. Huh? So we finish off maximum. Friday, for those of you interested, you can come in and we'll do it. Okay.